Hi everybody. So I recently made a big artwork called Floss, which I'm standing in front of, and you can see that she is a big lady, just like her maker, and the majority of this work's actually made using fabric. So I wanted to give you a little how-to on weaving with fabric today in quite a textural manner. Right, so I'm really fortunate to have artists around me who are dressmakers and fashion designers, and I get given a lot of fabric. So I've actually selected these three vintage fabrics, and I'm going to start cutting up into strips. So it's really just a matter of chopping into fine or chunky strips. I'm more on the chunky side of things, and I'm sure you really don't need a demonstration on how to chop fabric into strips, but you know, I'm not going to make you watch that for hours and hours and hours. So I'll see you in a sec with some chopped up fabric. When the fabric allows you to do that, oh my god, it's so much easier. Alright, so I have threaded my medium size loom, which you can purchase through my website if you want. I popped a header down the bottom. You know, the header is what holds everything above it, and I will start weaving with fabric. So I've got my strips happening here, and I'm quite fortunate that the bits of fabric that I'm playing with at the moment are quite long, and I can kind of continually weave, but sometimes you might be chopping up little random bits and pieces that are only short like that. So I'll show you how to kind of, you know, work with everything. And I've got my chunky tapestry needle here, so it's got a nice big hole that I can use to thread the fabric, but sometimes we use things that are quite, or materials that are quite chunky, so you can use your fingers if you prefer. And then I'm basically just going to obviously weave over and under. No biggie, I'm sure you could have worked that out for yourself. So I'm just going to pull that fabric all the way through. Now, you can just leave your fabric like that. There's nothing right or wrong about that. And some people just leave it at that, and there are options that you know, that you can play with, particularly if you want to get into more textural things like my beautiful work floss. So you can start to pull these little clumps through like so that when we go on top, we're going to have a nice little kind of bobbly effect. So I'll just show you that by going the other way. I'm sorry if my board is banging on my microphone. She's so not professional. Oh, Scheisenhausen. Sorry guys, that's probably really annoying for you. Be mindful of that. Okay, so I've bored it around the other direction, and once again I'm just sort of pulling those through. It's essentially creating a loop without technically using a loop technique. So you can see we've automatically got, you know, a nice little bit of kind of textural, a textural element coming out here. I've finished weaving that yellow fabric through, and you know, here I've left quite a big bit hanging out. Some bits I haven't pulled anything out on this third row that I've created, and it's only come partly way across, and I'm leaving that little bit sticking out. So in this particular work, I'm being very kind of rustic in my approach, and particularly free form. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the blue now, and this is the technique that I mostly used when I created the work floss, which is the running wire technique. Also known as loops, and I have a loops video that you can refer to get the technique down pat. But essentially the loops are like a rye knot, except you're creating loops instead of pulling full tassels through. So I really kind of like this loopy effect that you get from the fabric. You can be sort of methodical in your approach, you know, doing a full row and you know, moving to the next 2 warp threads along, but I'm really going to kind of play with a little sort of clump here, and I'm being quite dense in the application of these loops by, instead of going to the next 2 warp threads across, I'm actually incorporating the previous warp thread that I've used and a new warp thread, so that creates a more sort of dense loops effect. Normally I just teach it by going to the next 2 warp threads along and not incorporating previous ones, but all guidelines that I share with people are just guidelines, and I always encourage people to use your imagination and your intuition as well. Your intuition is everything in weaving. So that's my little clumpy clump there. I've got more I can play with, so I'll just sort of finish that off and we'll see what happens next. Oh, it's so exciting. I have added that short little bit of fabric that I showed you earlier, and I've done that in a sort of loop style as well. So I've just kind of randomly placed, you know, a looped, using the loop technique, just sort of randomly placed it here, and then I've got another random placement there. So, you know, they can really kind of stick out and create a lot of texture if you like. If you've got something that's actually a lot kind of smaller, like say you've got a little piece that's sort of that long, then because we're, you know, this work is going to be quite congested, shall we say, it's going to be a lot going on, you can literally just place it behind one of the warp threads and push it down, and whatever goes on top is just going to keep it in place. So in some of my works, I'm using weaving techniques, but I'm also just shoving stuff in the work. The important thing to remember is to keep your work structurally sound. So just be mindful that it's not really loose and that you're using rows of plain weaving between things if you feel like they need to be a bit more secure or locked in. But yeah, that's my way of weaving with fabric. So straight, flat rows, sure, but you know, isn't this delicious, this texture? Enjoy. Okay, so this is where my piece ended up. So it's a bit of a crazy little lady, and I'll do a proper shot for you for the end of the video. But yeah, so that's where this uber textural fabric weaving with fabric option can take you.